Great. So while we're kind of waiting for everyone to come in, we're really excited about today. Actually, we've been doing. I'll introduce Marigold in a second, but we've been doing Marigold Lives for a couple of years now, and this is by far our most popular one yet, which is really exciting for our industry and exciting for budtenders and retailers. Really to see the level of interest coming from everyone in the space. My name is Katie. I'm the co-founder of Marigold PR. We have been in the cannabis space since 2016. So we kind of rode the wave through legalization. We've worked with over 60 cannabis companies, including, brands, both medical and rec. We've worked with retailers and accessory brands, lots of LPs, and of course, a fair amount of kind of B2B ancillary services. We love this industry. About a year ago, we started digging in a little deeper on sort of the retailer and budtender side of things. We spent a long time talking to stores, visiting stores, and really trying to understand where the gaps were in terms of kind of engagement and inclusion in the industry. From that, we launched Tether. So Tether is a community for budtenders. And it's really event focused, and we've got lots of fun things coming. And Danielle's going to take you through some of that information in just a sec. The format of today, we're going to go through all of the data, the answers that budtenders shared through this presentation and talk about some insights. And then we have a Q&A coming up at the end. So the best way to capture your questions is actually to use the Q&A function. Danielle's going to be checking the chat too, but if you pop them in the Q&A, they're easy to find. And then of course, while we've got the Q&A with Amber and Ryan going, we will be also kind of moderating that chat. So get your questions ready and feel free to pop them through the Q&A along the way, and then we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. All right, over to you, Danielle.
Okay, great. So like Katie mentioned, all this data is brought to you by Marigold and Tether. So Tether is a community for budtenders. We aim to reward budtenders and bring them together with each other and the community at large. We did launch this past summer in Edmonton. We hosted a great event with Parkland Flower and Veritas Cannabis. At this event, we engaged local budtenders, and although it was Edmonton-based, we actually had a few people drive several hours to come out and connect. So it was really this great insight into the need of having this event. We had food, drinks, gift bags, prizes, and an awesome seed popping demo and a tour with Parkland Flower. So next up, in terms of events for Tether, we do have Budtender Appreciation Week that's coming March 21st to 25th. We do have some great partnerships that are available. So definitely, if you're interested in learning more on how to engage budtenders, reach out to Katie and myself. And we also do have some great no-cost ways for retailers to join in as well and give back to their staff too. And budtenders can register today, and that's at tetherbuds.com. And I wanted to give a huge shout out to our B-Week Advisory Committee. We have a great group of budtenders and retailers joining us, including Amber and Ryan, who we'll hear from a little later today. And definitely give them all a follow on social. There's some great industry content happening over there. And any of our other advisory committee, definitely introduce yourself in the chat if you're joining us today. Over to you, Katie.
Great. All right, so to kick us off, we're really looking broad scopes at some of the respondents and some information about what today's Canadian budtender looks like. So in terms of our methodology, we used SurveyMonkey. We reached over 300 Canadian budtenders from across Canada, and the survey ran from September to December. We did incentivize the survey, and budtenders had a chance to win lunch for their team for the week, and it was a $500 value. So congrats to Sherry at Soul Rebel in Scarborough. She's the winner, and we'll be shipping her prize out later this week. So broad scopes, what the audience looked like. what had some surprising areas for us anyways. In terms of our respondents, just over 50% came from Ontario, 30% in Alberta, 13 in BC, and then 4% represented the rest of the country. Our goal next year is to really make sure that we're getting to the Maritimes and digging a little bit deeper into some of those smaller audiences. 92% of those who took the survey were under 45, and 41% were between 26 and 35. And so to me, that was actually a little bit more mature than I actually expected to see. So I thought that was interesting. 56% responded, they identified as female. And then the additional layer to consider is that, like Ryan, who's on our call today, a lot of people who run the store and who are in store management are also budtenders themselves. So they have a lot on their plate. So 39% of those that responded actually were in a store management position, along with 1% actually being the license holder themselves. When we look at the industry experience, there's no big surprises here. On average, about just over 30% have been in 1 to 2 years, which obviously aligns with retail. But a fair it's sort of this kind of even split. So a fair number are really new to the industry, less than 6 months or less than a year. And then we have those who have been in cannabis for 3 to 5 years plus. And so I think that's really neat that we've got some of that legacy knowledge permeating into retail and a part of some of the dialogue. Part of our survey, we asked a lot of kind of open-ended questions because we really, along with the data, wanted to get the sentiment behind how budtenders are feeling. And overall, budtenders are really proud and passionate about their roles. This is definitely not just another sort of retail role. And you see here, being a budtender is so much fun and rewarding. Working with customers and helping them makes my day. And then this nugget about it being a challenging job, we see in a few places, because along with the education and all of the other things required, in order to do a great job as a budtender, it is a challenging job. And there is a fair amount of work there that you don't necessarily see in different retail environments. Next slide there. Perfect. So we asked about wages, and I hope you guys can read this. So essentially, we went out to find out, what are you making per hour and how fairly do you feel you are compensated for your role? And you can see there's quite a mix, anywhere between $14 and $20 an hour plus in terms of wages. Of course, that's going to be market dependent, and minimum wage has an impact on some of these numbers too, depending on what province you're in. And so what we actually thought was quite interesting is those sort of in the $19 to $20 an hour plus range, was a significant portion of the pie. Another thing that is pretty significant is the amount of budtenders that actually do feel that they are fairly compensated for their work. So, we're going to get into it a little bit further around the nuances of their jobs and how challenging it can be for them. But I think that job satisfaction seems pretty high with a large mix of the group. And then of those who, have concerns about compensation, we have some quotes that can kind of help articulate what that looks like for some of those people. So here's an example of one of them. So seeing some stores offer $14 to $16 an hour for budtender roles is unfortunate. Our job requires a lot of knowledge and care for our clients. Higher wages and a focus on a supportive management and non-toxic work environment should be a starting point for all stores. And of course, that should be a starting point, non-toxic for any sort of work environment. But we do see those coming in on the lower end, that there is some advocacy and some passion around really moving that needle for budtenders and really articulating how challenging and how big this role really is. So we asked about job perks, and we had a laundry list for everyone to look at. And so the number one thing that budtenders are seeing as a job perk, not their number one priority, but the number one thing they are seeing is swag. So about 65% of budtenders have received swag. And, the feedback we've got from our advisory committee is that swag is still really relevant. And really, the more functional it can be, the better. People, we all know, aren't looking for junk. So functional pieces were recommended. And then, of course, getting a little bit creative with things is always of value. About 34% have healthcare benefits. We'll see later that is something that budtenders are asking for. And really only less than 20% have ever received any sort of sample. This is another trend that's going to come through as a key priority for budtenders to do a better job at their job. Next slide. So I thought this was interesting. So budtenders are really open to trying many different consumption methods. And we can kind of see the laundry list here of all the different methods that they're trying. But at the end of the day, budtenders are really, their ultimate favorite is flower. So in a way, they're kind of traditionalists. Although open, it's sort of something that is interesting to consider, because what we see is topicals rating quite low right now with budtenders. And so that's one type of communication, one type of strategy. And then flower, of course, number one, which may kind of change the way you need to communicate or the education involved. When we ask budtenders around their preferred method of consumption, again, very, joints and bongs. That's what they love, and everything else is kind of peppered in there lower on. So again, from an education perspective, it is really good to kind of understand where everyone's sitting in terms of their preferences and in terms of the types of cannabis that they've been trying. So something we talk a lot about at Marigold as a PR agency, and talk about in general with cannabis, it's really hard to get people talking about it sometimes in a public way. The analogy we give all the time is, people are much more willing to post a picture of a cheers or a glass of wine than they necessarily are of their joint or their pipe. And so I think that this budtenders present such an amazing opportunity as industry advocates, because 65% of them are talking about their job on social media. And that might even be higher than what we're seeing kind of an industry average. Some of the people we've worked with along the way have concerns about aligning their profile with cannabis because of stigma, whereas budtenders are really leading the way in this. And Danielle, we got the social handles for the advisory committee, but there are some budtenders producing some really fun, interesting content. And it's a great way for brands and retailers to sort of see what's resonating and see how people are responding. Another question we asked is about growing. So we know from the event with Parkland Flower, where we did the seed popping, it was of huge interest and there were a ton of questions. And so I think this also presents another interesting area. We know some retailers do sell a little bit more. Oh, Kylie's here. We do sell a little bit more in the way of some growing supplies and things like that. But, from a personal cultivation perspective, there's huge interest. 30% are currently growing, but 40% want to in the future. Another little nugget here is that for those that grow, close to 70% felt comfortable talking about it with customers and clients. And then when we asked why they didn't grow, these answers are very similar to what we see kind of outside of the industry. Not enough proper space, or not enough time, or a little bit on the education front. But all that to say, from a growing perspective, another kind of advocacy area that budtenders have to offer is that they do have a propensity to grow, and they are very interested. So lots of fun opportunities kind of on the seed side and all of that. Right, over to you, Danielle.
Awesome. So pivoting over into education and events, budtenders really want education through experience. It's clear that budtenders care deeply about their jobs, and they take accountability for their own product knowledge. And we can see that because personal online research is the #1 way that they're learning about new products. And this really does open up a great opportunity for brands to be pulling together their own engaging educational content, because really the onus shouldn't be on the budtenders to be doing their own research in their off time. Obviously, it's a passion for them and they are doing that anyway. But there's lots of opportunities to really make your educational content stand out and really be the leader there. Some of the other ways that they've been learning is through brand ambassadors coming into the store and their own personal purchases and word of mouth as well. The interesting thing that we're seeing too is budtenders do rely a lot on customer feedback. And I think, they can't try everything, right? So they really are looking to build those relationships with customers so that they can have an honest back and forth about the product, and then they can relay that back to the rest of their team and to the brands at large. So we thought this particular quote was very telling and goes back to the need for sampling. The budtender said, "My belief is if I haven't smoked it, I don't know." And I think that's true for all of us. We can see lots of products with hype online, and really what it comes down to is trying it yourself and making it know what its personal things are. So when it comes to the preferred way that they'd like to learn about products, really personal purchasing and sampling is the #1 way that they want to be educated. Followed by their own online research and brand ambassadors. Pop-ups and the OCS and third parties are ranking lowest in terms of education at the moment. So budtenders also want their education to be fun. They don't have time to be reading a 5-page email, and they don't want to be sitting at their computer being lectured to. Really, the opportunity is there to create engaging events that bring in fun, but also bring in that education in a really hands-on way. So experiential education is top of mind. Budtenders have shown overwhelming interest in cultivation tours, sommelier sessions, and cannabis education sessions. Really, budtenders want to be at events about and with weed. Following up are things like puff and paint nights, happy hours, planting and joint rolling workshops. Again, things that are related to cannabis. Budtenders want to be engaging with each other in an authentic way, and that means consumption at events. More general events like axe throwing, pub trivia, and fitness classes have been ranking lowest. That being said, when it comes to activations, you still want to be aligning with your brand and your values. So if you do have a brand that is really wellness focused and you're targeting athletes, it would still potentially make sense to host an event like a yoga workshop or a spin class where it really aligns with your brand values. And again, just coming back to sampling, really with budtenders, all roads lead back to sampling. They want to be able to consume at events, and ideally they want the cannabis to be provided. So going to cultivation tours and education, there's lots of ways that you can really lay out these experiences. That being said, what we know from the latest AGCO update in Ontario is while you can provide educational sessions off-site, you cannot be providing transportation or accommodations. So that does pose some interesting challenges, particularly with cultivation tours where you would need a bus or something like that. But there are still lots of ways to work around that. And then, of course, workshops and events. Here are some of the great ones that we've attended and hosted in the past. Dustin and Kylie did a great job with that seed popping workshop. And what was great there was the budtenders had so many questions, and especially having a master grower being able to walk them through everything. It was a level of education that they wouldn't necessarily be able to get from a brand rep in store.
Oh, but Danielle, who rolled that perfect joint back there?
Oh, my not so perfect joint. And actually, I'm not sure that Ivy or Siobhan is here, but they could attest I was definitely the slowest learner in the class. But now I can do it and I can teach others. So all good. And events do need to be cannabis friendly, even if samples aren't being provided. 83% of budtenders think it's important. And we've seen this anecdotally with the industry at large as well. You know, whenever there's a conference without a consumption kind of component, everybody goes to Twitter in a rage. So we want to be able to smoke and connect at events. And it's also interesting, over 40% aren't really interested in alcohol, both in general and at events as well. So that's an interesting piece of insight there. Over to you, Katie.
Great. So the next kind of area that we're focusing on is careers and what budtenders are looking for from their careers in cannabis. And I thought this was such a big telling point. 75% of the budtenders that we surveyed were interested in pursuing a career in cannabis. I think that is an amazing number and also speaks to the kind of talent pool that our industry has ahead of us, with so many amazing individuals with this ground level training, really understanding consumers and really understanding products. It was split between, it's cut off a little bit, but exploring a career in cannabis, that was 50%. Retail management was also of interest to many people. Starting their own cannabis company came up as well. And then there's a section that, you know, they really haven't thought about it yet, and they're happy as a budtender. So I really found that exciting. And you think about the improvements the industry can see through hiring some people that really have the on the ground experience. And speaking of kind of we spoke a little bit like about the passion that these budtenders have, and we got a lot of comments sort of in this vein. I love what I do. I'm passionate about it. I've been budtending since the beginning of legalization, and a good budtender is someone who is passionate. And of course, this is probably every retailer's dream, to have a staff of extremely passionate individuals that are spending all of their free time learning about the thousands of SKUs. But that's kind of easier said than done. But given the length of time we're seeing budtenders are spending in the industry and the passion behind it, and then layering into those career opportunities, there really is a lot to work with here. Another area we asked about were areas the cannabis industry could improve on. And so there were a few key themes that came through. So then the number one thing that kept coming up is packaging. And it came up through the sentiment and the open answers as well. And when budtenders are talking about packaging, they're talking about both what's allowed on the packaging, the information that's on the packaging, and then also what the packaging is made of. And budtenders are viewing that as one of the top ways the industry can improve. Followed closely is regulations and education as really kind of the most important areas. Price, sustainability, and building a networking community are also important. Understandably, we see some of the things like patient support rank lower with budtenders. That makes a lot of sense. That's not who they're supporting, or it's not not the way they're allowed to speak about it. And that is a frustration that they shared, is that budtenders are struggling with the wellness conversation within the regulations, within the people that they're seeing through. And that's a big challenge for them. And so that conversation and that patient piece fits into the regulations and fits into all the education that is required to navigate that conversation in store. Another area that we didn't ask specifically about in the survey, but we have seen pop up across social, and we have seen some issues sort of arise here and there across the country, is that safety does seem to be of a concern to budtenders. So, I think it's a few layers. So, one, working alone or closing alone, that's always been a challenge in retail, and budtenders are feeling that as a challenge. The security piece is really interesting to me, because we think about all budtenders are saddled with on a day-to-day basis. And then now, in some provinces, they have to check vaccines. They have to check all sorts of other things. They're already checking ID. They're talking to people about wearing masks. So, it's a lot on their plate, dealing just with the people coming through the store. And I think, COVID has aggravated this, but kind of on that aggravation note, um, our advisory committee had actually talked about training for de-escalation and some support learning how to manage clients where there might be a challenge. So I really do think that's something for retailers to be considering. These sentiments also came through quite a bit. Budtenders really value their relationship with the clients. Like, I love that they say clients versus customers, right? That even puts it in a different vein. And their ability to grow the relationships mean a lot to them. And so I think that that's something kind of interesting when you think about other industries, like, for example, the bar industry. Bartenders do generate a big following, and if they move between locations, sometimes that following is going with them. So in saturated markets where you have amazing staff and amazing budtenders, incentivizing them to stay is really important, because they are growing those relationships, and they are a voice for your company and for the industry. This is sort of a laundry list of additional sentiments related to industry and job improvement. So of those who are, there was a fair amount of people who were advocating for higher pay and benefits, tips, unionization, a bunch of that kind of stuff came through. Being able to smoke at work, better discounts, diversity came through in quite a few ways. And so really worth noting there. Opportunities for budtenders to work at other cannabis retailers, we thought was quite interesting, because some of the budtenders wanted, in the last comment there is really around getting more hours. So a lot of these roles are part-time roles. We're going to ask a little bit more about that next year in terms of how many hours people are working and things like that. But we do know a lot of the roles are part-time roles. And a lot of the players have non-compete clauses, which does make that challenging if a budtender is looking to round out their hours, and if the hours aren't available. So that is something to consider. Danielle, over to you.
Okay, great. So really running alongside of events, we do have the sense and need for community. 85% of budtenders are interested in engaging with other budtenders, both locally and across Canada. There is that appetite for being able to come together and not just even learn from LPs, but really have a chance to chat about their jobs, chat about their passions, and really have that wider sense of community. And some of the sentiments that we saw as well is that this was a little more present pre-legalization, and how that corporate structure has kind of changed a few things there. So some additional sentiments we saw is that, especially in saturated markets like big cities like Hamilton and Toronto, is that there is a big sense of competitors and competition, and not really being able to engage with the other stores in their area. So that's something interesting too, especially at the budtender level. They don't want to be fighting with each other, and they really want to be able to work collaboratively. And hopefully, as stores really hone in on their niches and they start developing those really customized menus, we'll be able to see a bit more of that collaborative process, and have stores, be like, oh yeah, we don't have that because we focus on topicals, but our friends right down the street do. And really that back and forth sense of community. So 65% of budtenders currently feel a sense of community in their area. And we did see that split pretty significantly between the places that were in the larger areas and places that had a little bit less competition in stores. And they do feel very passionate about their jobs. And again, they do want to start looking as allies versus competition. And about 50% of budtenders are currently engaged in the industry through community and events. This is really interesting because there is so much room to bring more budtenders on board and become involved in a greater sense. And also to just shout out to the Kind Winter Fair. We did see a lot of positive feedback coming through in some of the mentions of people that really enjoyed having that collaborative experience with other budtenders. Katie, over to you for key takeaways.
Sure. So we went through a lot of information today, and we're going to have a recording sent out after the fact, and you also will be able to download this deck. So if you didn't get everything, that's okay. And there are some deeper nuggets in some of the categories that we'd always be happy to chat about if anyone's interested. But really, how we see the key takeaways here are that budtenders are passionate industry advocates who take pride in their role. Budtenders are interested in education through experience. Community is important to budtenders, and so enter Tether. And close to 70% of budtenders surveyed said they want to advance their career in cannabis. And we always like to kind of add this, like make sure to thank your budtender. That's what Budtender Appreciation Week is going to be all about. But you know, they do a lot of great work for our industry, and a lot's on their shoulders. So that's the end of our formal presentation. So thank you so much for sticking around. The chat is hopping. And I think we've got quite a bit in the Q&A. So we're going to have Ryan from Lake City, Cannabis, sorry, using your Twitter handle, and Amber Craig from 424 join us. And I'd love, if we could kick it off, Ryan and Amber, could you give a little bit of background on your expertise for anyone that doesn't know you?
Amber, you want to go first?
Sure,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Firstly, thank you so much for having me and for presenting this. I was taking so many notes. It's really interesting. I started in cannabis industry in 2013, doing some contract work for 420 Clinic, which was the first medical cannabis resource center in Alberta. And that role quickly evolved to a full-time gig over 4 years ago with the recreational brand 420. So I've been doing that for a while. I also teach at Mount Royal University a cannabis retail marketing course that I also created as well, and sit on a committee for that university on cannabis education courses. And yeah, just thanks for having me.
Ryan?
Awesome. I'm really bad at these intros. So yeah, my name is Ryan Roach. I'm the co-owner and operator of Lake City Cannabis, 2 different shops here. Our first one in Chestermere, which opened very shortly after legalization as well. And we just opened up another shop in Calgary right next to Mount Royal University, just down the way from Amber, just in late or in May last year. Super passionate about the industry. I've been a medical user for, I don't know, a long time, and a recreational user for a long time as well. I'm passionate about budtenders. I'm passionate about a balanced industry. And I'm just really super excited to be able to bring value. It's one of our big things about trying to give value back to operators and growers and budtenders around us. We do a lot of social media with that. So super happy to do a Q&A. I'd love to just share whatever I can.
Awesome. Danielle's going to manage taking the questions, but maybe before we dive in, was there anything that came through in the survey that was a surprise to you or maybe felt different than the experience that you're having, Ryan?
No, it's actually, I'm not surprised at a lot of the responses there. It seems pretty aligned in the way people have felt the descriptions I've got, and talking to different budtenders along the way. So I think there's some real good alignment out there from folks, and you know, it's good to see that we're starting to ask some bigger questions, starting to create a more stable industry. Because there's really a lot of benefit and a lot of opportunity for people who would like to take this further, with growers or sales agencies or with different retailers. So it's good to see exactly kind of what I thought, but it's so nice to have all this feedback to be able to just really reflect upon it.
Awesome. What about you, Amber? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, kind of aligned with Ryan. I thought there was no major surprises. I was kind of pleasantly surprised at the rates that are being paid and that people feel fairly compensated. I think that's something that wasn't really there at the start of legalization. So it's nice to see that wages are creeping up and people feel like they're getting compensated fairly. So that was nice to see, but no major surprises. It's very, very much in line with what I've heard from our staff and other people in the industry as well.
Great. All right, Danielle, over to you to manage the Q&A.
Awesome. So the first question up is asking about what you think about giving budtenders sample products. And I know, Ryan, that's something you've been working on with your team in some pretty interesting ways. So I think I'll let you start with that one.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that I believed in from day one. It's something we've executed super heavily. One of our amazing Budtenders is in the chat today. Big shout out to Maddie. You can follow her on TikTok too. She's hilarious. We really believe in it. It is super, super important. So if you're a retailer in here, a sales agency or anything, this is how you're going to get movement on your product. This is going to allow your Budtenders to be educated, to be thinking about what they're going to be suggesting. I saw a question come up here about how to engage with people if there's some sales issues or they don't know how to sell something, or maybe there's some adversity to things. So understanding your product, understanding where they're coming from, and actually just putting it in people's hands is so critically important. It's something I would never give up. You know, per store, we budget about $250 per week on just sampling alone. So it's a big deal for us, and I think it's something that as an industry we're just going to keep moving forward with. I just saw a question pop up. It's got to be purchased, and we purchase all of it.
Yes, yeah, great question from Joyce from Cannabis Retailer in the chat. Yes, all samples do need to be stamped, so they do have to go through the system. Amber, any thoughts around sampling while we're on the topic?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and I think that's what the Budtenders want. I wish that the government agencies would get together and loosen their regulations on that, because at least when we've been working with them, they crack down pretty hard. I've seen them send undercover people, and I've seen them hiding in parking lots and waiting for it to happen and go down. So it's pretty intense, and I know that it's a new industry and we have a ways to go, but my hope is that it would eventually become more like liquor, where that can be more free flowing, and that's always part of a training program. We've done what we can to kind of get around that, offering really great staff discounts, for example, but it would obviously be a lot easier if, you know, producers could give those samples directly to staff without either side being worried about a fine there. I know there have been some fines in Alberta for it, which obviously puts some people on edge, and maybe they target certain companies and not others. I'm not sure, but I would love for just the industry as a whole to sort of advance to the point where we could do that in a much easier way.
Yeah, for sure. And someone put in the chat the AGCO updates that are coming into effect in June, and that is going to affect sampling a little bit. It does clarify that samplings and tastings are allowed. However, they do have to be a small quantity. What counts as small is not specified, but one could assume it's a single serving versus, you know, an ounce. And they have clarified that can happen offsite. But as I mentioned earlier, they also did state that for educational training and things like that, LPs cannot provide the transportation or accommodations. So that does change some things. And of course, Alberta is a whole other ballgame out there as well when it comes to tastings and sampling. So it's definitely not straight right across the board, that's for sure. And I expect we'll see some more changes over the next few years. So I do have a question around budtender consumption method versus consumer consumption method, and that's not something that we didn't survey consumers on a large scale. However, I'm wondering if you guys have seen any anecdotal things at the store level. I know for most of us, the industry tends to be some of the largest consumers. So I'm thinking that that would really align with Budtenders as well, but curious to hear everyone's thoughts.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that, I guess. So yeah, we really encourage our Budtenders to try all sorts of different consumption methods. Back to the sampling program, we make that really easy for them as well. But for Budtenders, I would really, sometimes people are not as comfortable with this or comfortable with that. I really encourage folks to sample across the board and try different consumption methods, look for best practices, because your consumers are going to want to know that. So it's going to make your job well and easy if you understand how to use a bong correctly, or how a vaporizer should be packed, or what to do for troubleshooting on cartridges. So I think a lot of people are still using joints. I think joints is one of those big ones for Budtenders. I'm always a nerd about my bongs. I love my bong, and I'm always trying to push people towards bongs. But I bet it's like a crazy mix. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would just add that we know that industry-wide, like 82% of purchases come from a Budtender recommendation. So obviously, the more that they try things, the more that they're going to recommend different formats, and they're going to lean heavily towards what they've already used. But I think one thing that COVID did for this industry that was super interesting was it brought a lot of new users into the fold, because people were stuck at home and maybe dealing with some medical stuff or some anxiety and looking for ways to kind of explore and really had nothing else to do. So, traditionally there was so many people with legacy market experience, and now there's a really good mix. And those people that are new to the market, they're willing to try pretty much anything. So I think the doors have really swung open for all these producers that are in, looking at edibles and topicals. And I mean, the fact that I can get my bath products with weed in it is amazing. I like my morning routine, my toothpaste is infused, my face wash is infused, my cream's infused, I've got my gummies, smoke when I get home. Like, it's pretty cool that you can infuse anything now. So I think there's just lots of opportunity.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And Maureen in the chat made an excellent point that age is also an indicator when it comes to consumption method. We do know that depending on the age, you'll have some different preferences there. And I agree also, it depends on how new they are to cannabis. It's funny, I brought this up on Twitter earlier today because someone was talking about tweed beverages, and I personally like them, but I typically only buy them if I'm entertaining my mom and her friends. So just some interesting notes there. Somebody has asked how we're going to be passing back this information to store managers and store owners. As Katie mentioned in the onset, this will be recorded and sent out and available on YouTube. And the presentation will also be available to download from marigoldpr.com. And of course, we're hoping that all of our wonderful advisors will bring back all of their answers to their teams as well. So from Pauline, she asks if Budtenders are frustrated about all the medical questions they receive, and how do you help a person without giving medical advice? From the answers in the survey, quite a few people absolutely were frustrated. Not that they received medical questions, but that they couldn't answer them how they wanted to. Ryan and Amber, interested to hear your insight there.
Sure. Yeah, I can start with that one because this is something we've talked about at length, but the regulations at a federal level allow for education and scientifically accurate information about a product. I mean, it's a complete irony that we're even selling medical products in recreational space. I mean, CBD, CBG, CBN, these are medical products that we're selling. So the fact that we can't give proper medical advice doesn't really make sense. But on the other hand, these are not doctors giving out these products. So I understand that. How we've navigated that is just coming back to the scientific facts about the plant. So you can speak to the properties of a plant. So you could say CBD is an anti-inflammatory, but you cannot say CBD is great for arthritis. So if you remove the use around a medical question out of it, you can still give them a recommendation. And again, this is something that at least AGLC is really paying attention to, unfortunately, but the most common one is like sleep, pain. And we always train our staff, just say what qualities are you looking for? And then we can make a recommendation, but don't attach it to a medical condition, and then that would be compliant.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Amber nailed it on the head. I'll just echo more of that is, if you're struggling with those conversations, and they can be difficult, especially, those who have medical needs can sometimes be in states of, excess need where they're very upset, or they don't know what to do, or they're very confused. So understanding how to calm a situation, be empathetic to a consumer's needs and what they're looking for, but also making sure you ride that regulatory line can be tricky. Just back to what Amber said, following the understanding what the ask is, but using wordsmith type language to just become a wordsmith of things that you can and cannot say. Instead of this is great for sleep, be like this is a nice option for rest, and things like that can help you really gray out those lines. And most consumers understand. I think I've really noticed from a bud tending standpoint that over the course of the last about 8 months, that the broad range of consumers who are interested in approaching a recreational dispensary to learn about medical things already have a predisposition, understand that we can't give them medical advice, and that they're just more looking for recommendations. So understanding that and becoming a little wordsmith yourself can definitely help you bridge those gaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Can I
that's
jump
great.
in with a question? Can I hijack with a question? Amber, you mentioned some of the products that you're using at home. And, we see that the beauty category expanding and some of the products available. Like, what is that conversation like? How are, it's just so wild to me to think of the variety of products that you are responsible for selling at a recreational cannabis store, like you mentioned. And so where are all kind of the beauty and some of those, the face creams and all of that? How is that working with you guys at this point?
Very, very similarly. So again, just coming back to the properties of what's in the product, and can't really speak to the cosmetic benefits necessarily, but you can say something factual about the properties of the plant. So this has antioxidants, is factual, and that's not giving advice. You're not telling them what to do with that. That's for them to fill in the gaps there. But I think just the sheer fact that these are products that people are buying anyways that aren't infused, there's less of an educational curve there seems to be with like the cosmeceuticals in particular. I mean, anyone who's spending money on a face serum, you probably don't have to explain to them. If someone's coming in asking for that, they likely already know what that's about. The additional point would just be trying to explain why would they want that infused with CBD. That's again, back to a challenge, but you just need to lean heavily on the properties of what's in there and not what they're going to do as a benefit. But there's really cool stuff. And in most cases, just the ingredients themselves are kind of selling it. And of course, if your bud tender has tried it, I was in one of our stores in Canmore, and Carly, who's actually on the call, I think I listened to her talking about the vitamin C brightening serum, and yeah, 2 of my friends bought it. So she was so great at talking about how it makes their skin feel. And, there's always ways to get around it. But I think those are products that people already know. People know what a bath bomb is, they know what toothpaste is. So it's less difficult to kind of explain why you would want that. It's just the challenge of why the benefit of CBD or THC in those products, but it's the same thing as anything else. You just have to stick to the properties of the plant.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm seeing in the chat that the vitamin C serum is great. When my non-infused one runs out, I guess I'll have to come over to you for that recommendation. Another question that we've had is for topicals, could you say that THC helps with circulation and CBD helps with inflammation, or is that too medical? I think that those are both facts. Not sure if anyone else has any thoughts on those.
Yeah, you could definitely. So that exact example, you can say CBD is an anti-inflammatory. You just can't say use CBD for an anti-inflammatory condition. Like again, the arthritis example. So the fact is CBD is an anti-inflammatory. You cannot give someone medical advice on what to do with CBD.
Perfect. And flipping away from the kind of medical side of things, somebody is asking about sales commissions in a bud tender role. I know again with the AGCO update, it has kind of clarified around LPs being able to provide sales incentives. But I'm wondering what your guys' thoughts are from a retailer perspective and commission.
Yeah, we've kind of explored this idea kind of back and forth and figure out what we want to do in terms of that. You know, if it's helpful to do sales commissions. To be honest, the bit of the pricing sensitive market now becomes a little bit more difficult with those types of things. We like to offer different contests, or we like to look at maybe there's an opportunity where this is the month we're going to try something like that. I think I like it as an idea. Where I grow concerned with the sales commission idea is personally, I would rather make sure that we pay our Budtenders top rate amounts to make sure that we're keeping those valued people in the organization. The challenge I have with commission-based sales sometimes, although may be beneficial for the company, can often be a trade-off to the customer. So the customer, in terms, maybe they're being upsold into something that isn't the best fit for them. Maybe they're being pushed into a higher cart rate that they don't necessarily need. From a sales standpoint, absolutely fantastic. But from a trust standpoint, it's something I like to stray away from. We like to make sure we fill the customers' requirements before we look to fill the store's requirements first. So it's something that I'm always wary about. And when we do it, we like to make sure it's at the benefit of the Budtender and the benefit of the customer first, and then we worry about the company on the end of that. So that's just my side of things.
Snaps to that. Ethical business practices for the win. Amber, any thoughts on commission?
Yeah, I mean, kind of hard to answer that on a recorded call because it's not totally compliant, but there are ways to do it. So I'll leave that to leadership if anyone's on the call. That's kind of your problem to solve, but there's always a way to do it. But you know, to Ryan's point, if you're incentivizing your staff in other ways, I think that's what makes them happy at the end of the day. So you know, pay a fair wage and give good benefits, and you're likely going to have happier people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Definitely. As with all things cannabis, it's all just shades of gray, right? So definitely comes down to your comfort level on a store basis. So I have a question from Jeff Lawrence from Diecar. Hi, Jeff. Thanks for joining us. What's the opinion of Budtenders for non-infused edible samples from LPs?
We like it. It's, you know, edibles are a unique thing because even though there's cannabis in it, it's still food. So you want to know that the food tastes good, especially for these newer consumers or maybe not as experienced. They want to make sure it still tastes good. And we still have this ridiculous cap on THC for edibles. So I think a lot of times people want something that tastes delicious. So it's been very well received from our staff that are getting uninfused edible samples because there's some very, very delicious items available in the market. So I still think that's a great benefit.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. First of all, hey, Jeff, thanks for popping. I appreciate you, buddy. But absolutely, samples are fantastic. I'll give a shout out to the Wild Group, who recently dropped their gummies here in Alberta. They did a really big push on samplings of those, non-infused. Absolutely fantastic way to get us to experience them and obviously compare taste and what we're looking at. So an edibles producer side, definitely if you're entering a new market or you're launching a new product, wonderful way of just getting Budtenders to try it out, owners to try it out and make decisions to stock their menus with those. So 100% agreed, do it.
Yeah, I agree as well. Any sample's better than no sample, right? And even from a consumer perspective as well, I know when we were at Realm doing their grand reopening event in Burlington, they had Sweet Justice giving out non-infused samples of their cola. And that was really great. I know for me, a cannabis cola is not something I would typically try in general. So it's great to be able to be providing those in store and having that option without being infused. So I have a fun one from Jeff Day from Virtus. Hi, Jeff. Flyers or stickers in terms of swag and promo?
Stickers. Always stickers, 100% stickers. Um, Customers love stickers. Not that you're allowed to leave them in here, AGLC. But yeah, we love stickers. We love pins. We like to have those. Those are great. You know, here's a really good example. So stickers are really great. I'm absolutely against cards and flyers and stuff like that. It drives me nuts. We have so many of them. They're all over the place. So yeah, stickers, 100%.
I agree. People love stickers. My laptop, everything in my office is covered in stickers. It's the same with our staff in the stores. Any paper products, not only are they going to end up in the recycling from the retail staff, but customers often don't even want a bag. So they're definitely not going to take a pile of paper with them. So I just think it's better for the environment, and they're going to retain more information if it's done in a fun way.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Good to know. We'll have an order of stickers rolling in soon for B Week, that's for sure. And lots of people with some fun ideas in the chat. So definitely, if you do have a favorite swag item or promo item, definitely share it with us. So we do have a question. What do you think motivates budtenders the most to engage with LPs? Samples, swag, money, electronics, food, accessories, something else?
Yeah, I think any of those things really. I would say try to be creative. I feel like that's been a lost art in this industry in the last couple of years, where everyone has the exact same t-shirt, different logos. And I think people are looking for something unique that they'll actually use. You know, how many t-shirts can you really wear, I guess, but I think there's lots of items that budtenders use on a day-to-day basis that you could get branded. I've seen some really cool ideas from LPs where they will pay for, you know, pizza parties. Everybody loves pizza. Everybody loves parties. It's a win-win. Or you're spending some money on a budget for a really cool item that maybe isn't cannabis related, like electronics, like was mentioned there, iPads, things like that. So there's plenty of ideas. I think the important thing is just think outside the box and what's something that they would actually use. Maybe just stick away from the swag stuff a little bit.
Yeah, I think one of the more common ones that I hear, and Maddie will shoot me because I haven't even organized one for her yet, but a lot of budtenders would love facility tours where applicable. That allows them to get a little bit more availability into the process and meeting growers and understanding things. And it is a really cool process to be able to go into a grow and check those out and be a little bit involved. So I think that's a cool one. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways to get in there. I'm gonna give a really good example of someone who I think really killed this. Is Nicholson from Greybeard. Bubba did his world tour here, and I'll tell you right now, Bubba's come to visit me. But when Bubba was here, he actually spent more time with my Budtenders than he did me, going through his product, detailing them, describing to them, understanding what they were interested in, understanding how they could sell it better, or what's been some faults or issues. So on a grower side of things, sometimes that groundwork can make all the difference in just talking to budtenders on the ground. A lot of budtenders are very active on social media. They're very active on Reddit, and those types of places are another great way to grow your product if you have a budtender that's motivated and excited about what you have, because you took the time to actually spend that with them and understand them a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we love Bubba and the Greybeard team. And definitely, I've had a chance to tour a few grows, and it's always fun. When we took budtenders in the summer through Parkland Flower, it was really great. The questions they had were really amazing and things I wouldn't even think to ask. And I was doing a bit of media post-event, and the journalist said something really funny to me. He's like, Dustin has forgotten more about cannabis than I will ever know. And it's definitely the truth. And I think when you get a budtender in front of a master grower like that, sparks fly for sure. Awesome. So Amar has a question for Ryan and Amber. How can we best lobby the AGCL to change the regulations to adapt to the changes that the AGCO did to allow budtenders to create better selling experiences? I don't know if either of you have any experience lobbying.
Yeah, kind of. I'll jump in on that one first because I'm usually pretty outspoken about this stuff. Yeah, I'm all right. You know how I am about this. There's a lot that we can do. Unfortunately, I feel like we in Alberta we just have a really big gap in advocacy for recreational stores and independents and corporations, and there's just sort of really, unfortunately, a competitive gap that's going on. The AGLC, as much as we like to hassle our regulators, the AGLC does do a pretty decent job of listening. There's some fantastic individuals there that will just take a call from you in the middle of the day, have a conversation, and go over things. They are listening to feedback, but politics is involved in this thing along the way. I think we do need to get to a point where we can align all of our best interests in one way or another, and really advocate the AGLC to do that. I think if we get a healthy enough group, you don't need everybody. This is really the thing is, I think in Alberta here, we could align, a healthy group of 50 to 100 different individuals to get on board with making a better selling experience. And I know a lot of the AGLC leaders are definitely ears open to that. So maybe we all just need to get into a meeting and start collecting, and moving in that direction.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And Jeff in the chat also put down the ACC, the Alberta Cannabis Committee. And I know the Cannabis Council of Canada does lobbying as well. I don't know how much they're doing on the provincial level, but that would be worth checking it out as well. So somebody asked just around training budget for staff and how you kind of figure that out as a retailer and what you should be setting aside for training. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, anything that you're requiring of your staff to do for their job is paid. So, but if you're meeting pay like a budget for training outside of day-to-day stuff, there's ways to incentivize people to do education. And actually, I would say for any LPs here, that usually goes over really well. It's pretty unlikely for a lot of people to want to sit through educational content from LPs because there's so many of them. There's so many products, like there's thousands of SKUs. They're not going to just watch somebody's PowerPoint presentation for fun. So again, be creative in how you want to incentivize them to do that. And that is compliant if it's education focused, at least in Alberta. So there's lots of ways to go about that. So I think just think outside the box.
Yeah, I'll add one on that we do here. It's a bit of a weird one, but we actually offer a voice. Sorry, my brain just fell out of my head there. An audible copy of Leafly's Guide to Cannabis. So we actually give that to every budtender. It is fairly granular, but it is a really good framework piece of documentation that Leafly's put up that gives you just some very good baseline education for our budtenders. So we give that to all of them, allow them to, on their own time, or if they're slow, pop a headphone in, listen to that Leafly's Guide to Cannabis. It really gives them a good thing for that. Anytime we have LP available training, we try to do as much as we can. But education in this industry is a daily thing. If you're a retail store operator, if you are not actively educating your budtenders, you're missing sales opportunities, you're potentially creating bad experiences, and you're not really growing your budtenders in the way they want to be grown. So, it's a daily thing. We invest all the time into that. There's the title of that book. That was the Leafly's Guide to Cannabis. And you can find that on Audible. It's not very expensive either. It's an everyday educational thing. Take the time to understand new products. We've been a little bad at it lately, but every time we get deliveries, we actually create a new delivery log of the new stuff that's coming in and what you should know about it, and stuff like that. And take that time to do education every day. It doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't need to be extra. It can just be a little bit of everyday work with your budtenders on the floor.
Mm-hmm. And a note about some kind of upcoming opportunities. It's neat to see the conferences. I know we've got Dania here from Cannabis, and I think we have someone from Lyft as well. And it's neat to see that the conferences are starting to look more closely at engaging retailers and budtenders and incentivizing them to come, because sometimes it's a challenge, because whatever date they happen to be on is difficult for people to be out of the store. Sometimes you are facing that, but we're pretty excited to see that the conferences that have been attracting the industry for so long, and where we get a lot of our knowledge, are starting to provide additional opportunities, whether it's discounts on tickets or a free day for budtenders. So kind of keep an eye out for that too, if you're looking for ways to educate yourself, or if you want to be part of a fun industry event. I see the comment about the $100 price ticket. That's some of them are free. One of them is $20. We'll put together actually some of the links when we do a follow-up. We can send a link to the conferences and what they're doing for budtenders and retailers in there as well.
Okay, I'll add one extra note into that actually about education for budtenders. And for all you budtenders out there, if you're not already, you should get on social media. There are some brilliant people that are willing to just express their knowledge to you and teach you things if you're open and honest and willing to learn. So if you want more education, there's just some fantastically knowledgeable people on Twitter, TikTok, whatever you want to go. So yeah, it's another good way to do some education. Mm-hmm. Yes, Reddit, 100%.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of those pieces there. And our next question actually was places to get additional cannabis information besides the provincial governments and Leafly. I agree, Reddit's a great place to go. Definitely hang out on Twitter and you'll get some good stuff there. As well, other associations, Tether is looking to bridge the gap with education, as well as Budtenders Association, who I know is here today, and High Buds Club as well. And to Katie's point around the conferences, yes, quite a few of them are doing free tickets for retailers, including O Cannabis. And O Cannabis is coming up in June. Lift is coming up in May, and then there's the Growing Summit in April as well. So there's lots of fun things going on and ways to get involved.
Dania just said in the chat, hi Dania, retailers and budtenders get in free to O Cannabis. So that's great. That's awesome.
Oh, amazing. And yeah, and I know we have Barry on here from Lyft as well. So all of our conference friends in one place. So I have a question here around the AGCO update and fridges. So the update to the regulation there was that LPs can no longer provide fridges and other kind of permanent fixtures in Ontario for retailers. So as far as I know, stores having fridges is not a problem as long as they're paying for them themselves. That's how I interpreted the update anyway. So if anyone has any additional thoughts on that, yeah. So yeah, you can still have your fridge, you just have to pay for it yourself, which is a little disappointing, but all good. And what's the best route in contacting the city to opt in to allow retail cannabis stores? I'm not too sure about that one. I know our city that Marigold is located in doesn't have any cannabis stores yet, which is definitely a pain point for us. So definitely some things need to change there. But Ryan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I can probably advocate on this one a little bit. Yeah, I mean, this is a really tricky question, and definitely in Ontario, it's been kind of a black eye for the industry in terms of what's been given the ability for that. We didn't really have that problem in Alberta. In fact, there's one city that tried to do it for I think about 30 seconds and then ended it pretty quickly. But, I would really recommend, and I've done this here in a lot of cases, it is hard with bigger cities, is try to get involved with your counselors, try to get involved with your city staff, ask them questions, be kind, be open, especially in these days, it's a little trickier, but getting involved with these individuals helps move the needle. Maybe helps them better understand why things happen or how we do them. Maybe as an advocacy for the cannabis industry, potentially you remove some of those misconceptions about what the industry gets or what's there. there's also an opportunity too is rallying your public. Politicians listen to the public, especially when they start coming out in great numbers and talking about this, grabbing an advocacy group in your community and talking about how we would need that and we would like that and it would be better for the community, although hard can be done. So it's always a bit of a haul to advocate our local city councils and there, but if you're willing to put the work in and talk and try to convince people and get there, I mean, it's definitely possible. I've done it before, but you gotta go to council meetings as much as the awful as council meetings are. Go to your council meetings.
All right.
Yeah, I just
I
want
think
to add
that's-
on to that. Sorry. I was just going to say, because this kind of lives back into the earlier question about lobbying. Done a fair bit of lobbying in my career, and the first thing you'll learn in government relations is that you catch more flies with honey than vinegar, and that's very, very true with politicians. So just word to the wise, don't go in guns blazing and aggressive, because they will immediately shut down. So you'll have a lot of success if you treat them with respect and make them feel like the masters that they want to feel like. Just, lots of opportunities. They're very, very open. Like Ryan said earlier, like they really do listen and they pay attention to things. So I think, yeah, kindness 100% prevails when you're trying to get actual laws changed. That's just the way to do it.
For sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Something
Go
I
ahead,
had
Katie.
too. Yeah, some of the events we've done with retailers, we always recommend they include their local MPs or MPPs on the event list. And honestly, more often than not, they come. And, I think they're happy to be included, and, they're treated, you can treat them like VIPs a little bit, give them a tour, share some knowledge about what you've got going on, and just kind of deepen that relationship. That's assuming you already have a store and you're in your local area. But again, being kind and getting to know some of those stakeholders in your community goes a long way, especially if you need to put your hand up for something in the future. You've started to build that relationship.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great point. And, even when we're doing events, the Marigold and the Tether team, and even Candora, just comes to a larger sense of collaboration and playing nice with others as well. You don't want to be chopping people down every chance you get. You really want to be working together, because really when one person in our industry is succeeding, we all are, right? We still have a lot of stigma to bash, so it's nice to be able to do that in a collaborative way. So I think we're almost at the end of our questions. So if anybody does have anything else, definitely send it on through. But Maddie is asking, how do budtenders find selling craft cannabis brands and smaller brands versus the larger brands?
I can go first, sure. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think there is an assumption in the industry that craft brands will do better. I think there's a lot more to that, and that really hasn't been our experience. There's a consumer for everything. It's no different than any other product that you're selling. We happen to be selling cannabis, but if you're selling anything, there's going to be a consumer for all categories and all levels of experience that will want different things. If you ever want to do a fun experiment, do a blind test with your staff or your friends with some major grows and some craft, and 9 times out of 10, they cannot tell the difference. So I think as a whole, brands have gotten a lot better as the industry evolves and quality is getting better. There's always room for improvement, but it's a matter of preference. There's not a ton of brand loyalty yet for flower and for producers. So you are relying heavily on budtender recommendations, but it's an interesting question. I would say a lot of brands you might not expect they get asked for a lot. So
yeah, I would probably echo that. It's all over the map. Selling craft can definitely be a little bit more difficult in terms of pricing. Word craft is sort of weird. I don't know. I feel like we maybe need to move away from that word craft into just better better quality, or more traditional nomenclature on that. But like, it really comes down to your consumers and understanding what they're looking for and introducing those things to them. Some traditional consumers may only feel like, yeah, you know what, I can pick up original stash is the one I got. This is the one I have. And building relationships with those customers is probably the key one. When you start understanding your regulars and you start building trust with them over a sales technique, you know, you can build what they need. We have people that have come in and purchased the same thing for the last 6 months, and then, you know, they trust us a little bit better, and, you know, we're able to insert maybe some suggestions to them and really evolve their taste. So I think the key to understanding or selling different products from a Budtender scale of things is really understanding who you're trying to sell to first and catering that technique to them, and earning their trust, and you can get some better product out the door. But you know what, the easiest one is, if you're passionate about something, someone will be able to sense your passion. So if you really like something and you think it's friggin' awesome, get on social media or talk to your customers or whatever, and trust me, they will be drawn to your passion and probably try it just based on that alone.
Mm-hmm. Amber, anything you want to add?
No, I totally agree with that, actually.
Yeah, actually, I have a question, and we kind of started to touch base on it a little earlier, but how do you decide what to stock? Do you look to your Budtenders? Do you pick blindly with great care?
Yeah, we don't pick blindly for sure, I would say. We use a couple things. Like, we have a pretty big products team, actually. That's just because of the number of stores that we have. So, and actually all but one of our products team came from the stores. They were all Budtenders first, and then they made their way up to the corporate level, which is great because they have that firsthand knowledge of what Budtenders and customers are asking for. But we constantly survey our staff and have like a feedback loop so we can get their recommendations, but we also look to analytics and see what the data tells us, and we reorder what customer wants to buy. That's number one. And then we have the flexibility to try new things and bring in new products, but it's great to have that experience. I think that really lends itself to why Budtenders are so important. Like, elevating those people from our retail stores to make those product decisions has been a great asset for us, for sure.
Yeah, we do we do an enormous amount of detail on the subject. I could probably talk for an hour alone on what we do, but back to Amber, we use data to make a lot of our decisions. So we try to understand what people are buying, the rate of movement of those, the scale, what it's looking like. So we do that. We also create what we have as a list of blue chip stacks of things that are blue chip items in the store, or gain that status of that they will always be in store. This is the one we go. And most of that comes from our standpoint. We want to reduce friction decisions for our customers. They know that Lake City has this particular item consistently all the time, and they can walk in and pick it up, and they're going to come and pick it up, and we remove that friction decision for them. So we like to make sure that those items are stocked and ready to go. We also have a big passion on just bringing in new stuff. Consumers are, they love to move around. They love to check things out. I would say it's a very small percentage of people that sticks to one thing consistently. So we love to bring in brand new products, small growers, different items, you know, anything that could be of interest. So we really try to focus on keeping it exciting, and keeping it engaging for our customers and our Budtenders too.
Great. So the last question is, do you think Budtenders would be interested in writing letters of support for a constitutional challenge to create specific regulations for medical product distribution, including higher potency, alternative products, and distribution through storefronts? Is there a top choice industry association that could help with that? I'm not sure if there's any associations tackling that specifically. So if anybody listening is working on that, definitely throw that in the chat. But seeing how passionate that Budtenders are about the industry, and they do want to see a lot of these changes, I definitely think that there is an appetite there to get involved a little more politically. Awesome. So we don't have any more questions. So I think maybe we can just go around, and any last thoughts? I don't know who wants to kick us off. Ryan, you want to go?
I'll kick it off. Awesome. First of all, I really appreciate this, you guys. This is, I think, really nice to be able to take these questions, give some value back, and then obviously create some sort of further ongoing dialogue that Tether is doing. So I really encourage everybody on the line to just, get interested, get involved, ask more questions, go through the whole thing. Because this is how we grow the industry. This is how we make things better. This is how we solve problems. So there's really, there's really a lot of opportunity in this, but it also comes down to involvement. So one last little point for everybody out there: growing your brand as an individual in this industry is super important. There's some wonderful people growing their brands out there. Get on social media. Again, back to what Amber said, you definitely catch more flies with honey. So, be kind, be open, be generous, and you'll just get way more out of it. And there's a lot you can do, even as a bud tender. You can really make a career out of this thing. We're so early in the industry that you can grow and do some amazing things if you're willing to get involved and put your feet to the floor. So, if anybody ever has any questions or concerns or things or whatever, my DMs are always open. Happy to talk to anybody. And again, really appreciate you guys, and absolute honor to be here with Amber too. And I appreciate her as well. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks, Ryan.
That was super well said. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and hearing from Ryan as well. And it was brought up in the chat earlier, but there really is a lack of community, I think, between retailers and LPs in this industry, which is unfortunate. I hope that changes, but this was a great example of the cool stuff that can come out of it. For any retailers that are on this call, I mean, these insights are amazing, but talk to your own staff on a regular basis. Find ways to survey your people, ask for their opinions. They are always willing to share them. And for the LPs on the line, same thing goes. Ask what people want instead of telling us what we should have. I think there's lots of feedback that you'll get from retail staff, from the consumers. So I think this is a very good illustration of the power of information when you just ask for it. So anyways, thank you for having me, and I appreciate being here.
Thanks, Amber. Katie, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan and Amber. Thanks to everyone for joining us. That chat was amazing. So many people had comments and questions, and of course, Amber and Ryan, all their insight. We'll be doing, Tether's got lots of stuff coming up, including Budtender Appreciation Week. We have parties and hopefully in-person events coming this summer, where we'll be in different markets. So please reach out if you're interested. If you need any support with any branding or PR or social or anything like that, Marigold is here for you. Again, just this conversation is so important, and we're really excited to be a part of it. And thanks for so many of you for sticking it out the whole time.
Yes, just echoing Katie, thank you again for joining us. We do have our next Marigold Live, which is going to be coming up on March 8th, and that is to celebrate International Women's Day. So the format for that one will be a little different. We'll be joined by SheCan, and we'll be doing some speed networking. So that's going to be lots of fun. Definitely stay tuned for that. And like Katie mentioned, we have B Week coming up on March 21st to 25th. And thank you again to Ryan and Amber and all the rest of our advisors for helping to shape that great event. So thank you so much, everyone.